Right now, billions of kilometers from Earth, sunlight has almost lost its authority. Out there, beyond the warm inner architecture of the solar system, beyond Mars, beyond Jupiter's enormous storms, beyond the pale rings of Saturn, there is a world where daylight resembles a prolonged twilight, a place where the sun no longer dominates the sky, but hangs instead like a distant white star trembling in an ocean of blackness. And on that world, the winds scream faster than the speed of sound, not on the surface. Neptune does not truly possess a surface in the human sense. There is no ground waiting beneath its clouds, no continent, no ocean coast, no mountain standing against the atmosphere. The deeper you descend, the more the planet simply becomes itself. Gas becoming liquid, liquid becoming exotic ice, pressure becoming something so immense that ordinary human intuition ceases to function. Yet somehow, inside this freezing darkness, Neptune generates the fastest planetary winds ever recorded in the solar system, nearly 200 kilometers per hour, faster than the strongest hurricanes on Earth, faster than many bullets, faster than the sound barrier itself. And the disturbing part is not merely that these winds exist, it is that they should not exist at all. By every simple instinct, humans evolved under the warmth of Earth's sun. Neptune should be quiet. Cold objects lose energy. Warmth fades. Motion slows. Storms weaken. This is the logic of ordinary experience. A fire dies when heat disappears. Oceans calm when winds stop feeding them. Life itself slows in winter darkness. But Neptune violates that emotional expectation. The planet receives less than 1,000th of the sunlight Earth receives. Noon on Neptune is dimmer than twilight during a terrestrial storm. The sunlight arriving there is so weak that an ordinary human could block the sun with the tip of a finger held at arm's length, and still the atmosphere moves with unimaginable violence. For decades, scientists struggled to explain why. Even now, they're not entirely certain, because Neptune is not merely a distant planet. It is a psychological boundary, a place where familiar assumptions about warmth, energy, weather, and planetary behavior begin quietly collapsing into something colder and far stranger. Most images of the solar system accidentally lie to us. They show planets floating close together against colourful backgrounds, arranged neatly like ornaments in a classroom diagram. But the reality is almost entirely empty space. Neptune is so distant that radio messages travelling at the speed of light require more than 4 hours simply to arrive there. When the Voyager 2 spacecraft crossed Neptune's orbit in 1989, it had already been travelling through darkness for over a decade. And even then, Neptune remained largely unknown. The spacecraft revealed storms larger than Earth itself, black atmospheric vortices rotating through blue methane clouds, violent white plumes rising high into the upper atmosphere, a world that looked less like a frozen relic and more like something actively alive. Not biologically alive, but dynamically alive, restless, unstable, almost furious. And perhaps that is what unsettles the human mind most deeply about Neptune. Not merely its distance, not merely its coldness, but the realization that violence does not require warmth. That motion does not require comfort. That even near the edge of the sun's empire, where daylight weakens into little more than memory, nature continues building storms of colossal power without any concern for human expectation. There is something psychologically disturbing about this, because humans instinctively associate darkness with stillness. We imagine the outer solar system as silent, frozen, dormant, dead. But Neptune suggests something else entirely, that the universe does not become gentler as it becomes colder, only stranger. And beyond Neptune, the darkness continues for billions upon billions more kilometers. The sun itself gradually shrinks behind you. The familiar planets disappear. The warmth that shaped every moment of human evolution fades into insignificance. Eventually, even sunlight begins to feel accidental, and Neptune waits there in that distant twilight, wrapped in supersonic storms, orbiting endlessly through a region so remote that for most of human history, nobody even knew the planet existed. A giant world hidden in plain darkness, violent beyond expectation, cold beyond ordinary comprehension, and far more isolated than the human mind naturally knows how to imagine. For most of human history, the solar system felt small enough to understand. The wandering lights in the night sky appeared orderly, predictable, intimate, in a strange way. Ancient civilizations watched planets move across the darkness and imagined gods, omens, personalities. Even after the birth of modern astronomy, the planets still remained emotionally manageable. Worlds circling a star, distances large, certainly, but not psychologically impossible. The human brain is remarkably skilled at shrinking reality into forms it can emotionally survive. We draw circles around the sun. We place planets side by side in diagrams. We compress billions of kilometers into a single textbook page, and slowly, without noticing, we begin mistaking the diagram for reality itself. Neptune especially suffers from this illusion. To many people, it exists merely as the far blue planet, the eighth planet, a cold sphere drifting quietly at the edge of the solar system. Remote, yes, but conceptually simple. But this apparent simplicity comes from distance itself. The farther something is from human experience, the easier it becomes to underestimate. Earth feels emotionally real because humans evolved here. We understand rain falling against windows, ocean waves collapsing on coastlines, wind moving through trees. Even the violence of hurricanes still exists inside scales the human nervous system can process. Storms occur against familiar geography beneath a nearby sun. Neptune belongs to another category entirely. Its average distance from the sun is about 4.5 billion kilometers, equals sign 4, 510, 9 kilometers. But numbers alone do not communicate what this means psychologically. Light itself requires over 4 hours to cross that distance. The sunlight touching Neptune left the sun when many people on Earth were still asleep. Entire flights cross continents in less time than sunlight needs to reach Neptune. Human conversations begin and end. Storms form over oceans, cities wake, work, and darken again beneath evening skies. Meanwhile, the same photons are still crossing the emptiness toward Neptune. This is where human intuition quietly begins to fail. Because Earth is not merely closer to the sun physically, it is closer emotionally. The sun governs nearly every human experience. It warms oceans, powers weather, feeds ecosystems, defines sleep cycles, and shaped the evolution of every nervous system that has ever existed on this planet. Even modern civilization remains fundamentally solar-powered. Fossil fuels are ancient sunlight. Wind is redistributed solar heating. Agriculture is captured sunlight converted into biology. Humanity lives deep inside the sun's influence and therefore mistakes that influence for normality. But Neptune exists where solar authority begins to weaken. At Neptune's orbit, sunlight is roughly 900 times dimmer than on Earth. R21, at noon, illumination there resembles the faint dimness of terrestrial dusk. Shadows barely form. The sun no longer dominates the sky. Instead, it appears as a concentrated point of pale light suspended inside overwhelming blackness. And blackness matters. On Earth, darkness is temporary. Night always carries the psychological promise of morning. Human beings evolved under rhythmic cycles of return. Sunrise follows sunset. Warmth follows winter. Life follows spring. But the outer solar system feels different. Out there, darkness stops feeling cyclical. It starts feeling permanent. Even Neptune's year reflects this emotional scale. The planet requires approximately 165 Earth years to orbit the Sun once. T equals sine 165 Earth years. One Neptunian year is longer than the lifespan of most human beings who have ever lived. A child born during Neptune's northern summer would die long before autumn fully arrived. Seasons there are not experiences. They are eras, And yet, despite this immense cold and distance, Neptune is not still. This is the assumption early astronomers unconsciously carried into the outer solar system, that colder planets would become calmer planets, that energy fades naturally with distance from the Sun. This seemed reasonable because it matched ordinary experience on Earth. Warm air rises, cold air settles, heat creates motion. Remove enough energy and systems slow down. But Neptune refuses this emotional logic. In fact, the farther scientists looked into the outer planets, the stranger the relationship between coldness and violence became. Jupiter possesses colossal storms fueled partly by internal heat. Saturn contains atmospheric bands wrapping around the planet with astonishing speed. Uranus, oddly tilted and dim, behaves with eerie unpredictability. And Neptune, the coldest giant planet in the solar system, became perhaps the strangest of them all. Its atmosphere should have been sluggish. Instead, it moves with terrifying velocity. When Voyager 2 approached Neptune in 1989, scientists expected a relatively subdued world. After all, the spacecraft was nearing the outer frontier of planetary sunlight. The available solar energy there is tiny compared to Earth. But Neptune violated expectations almost immediately. The atmosphere was active, dynamic, violent. Bright methane clouds streak through the upper atmosphere like frozen smoke. Dark storms rotated across enormous distances. Wind systems accelerated to speeds no planetary climate model had confidently predicted. The farther humanity travelled from the Sun, the less reality behaved according to emotional intuition. And this pattern extends far beyond Neptune. Again and again, the universe reveals something deeply uncomfortable. Human expectations were built for survival on a warm terrestrial surface beneath a nearby star, not for understanding reality itself, because reality itself is mostly cold, mostly dark, mostly empty, and perhaps most unsettling of all, still astonishingly active despite that emptiness. Neptune begins teaching this lesson slowly. At first, it still resembles a planet, a sphere with clouds and weather and recognizable atmospheric structures. The mind attempts to anchor itself using familiar comparisons: storms, winds, seasons, clouds. But these similarities are deceptive. The deeper scientists looked, the more Neptune transformed from a distant version of Earth into something fundamentally alien, a world where heat emerges from hidden depths, where storms survive without sunlight, where the atmosphere may descend through layers of exotic chemistry impossible anywhere naturally accessible to human beings, and all of it unfolds in near total isolation at the edge of the Sun's fading reach. The comforting planetary map begins breaking apart here, because Neptune is not simply far away. It exists inside a completely different emotional relationship with reality itself. The first true crack in humanity's understanding of Neptune did not come from telescopes. It came from motion. For centuries, Neptune existed only as mathematics. Astronomers noticed subtle disturbances in Uranus's orbit, tiny gravitational deviations suggesting that another unseen mass was moving somewhere beyond it. In 1846, using calculations alone, scientists located Neptune before most people had ever imagined such a world could exist. A planet discovered not by sight, but by its invisible influence. Even its discovery carried something psychologically unsettling. Human beings had not found Neptune because they explored outward into darkness. They found it because reality itself refused to behave correctly without it. And when Neptune finally emerged through telescopes, it appeared calm, small, blue, remote. A dim sphere suspended near the edge of visibility. For generations, that image shaped human intuition. Neptune became emotionally categorized as distant and quiet, cold enough that little meaningful activity should occur there. Too far from the Sun to sustain dramatic weather systems, too deprived of energy to remain dynamic. This assumption lasted because observing Neptune from Earth is extraordinarily difficult. Even at its closest, Neptune remains billions of kilometers away. Seen through early telescopes, it barely separated itself from the surrounding stars. No spacecraft visited it for most of human history. Even today, Only one probe has ever passed near the planet. One brief encounter, a few hours beside a world older than Earth itself. And before that encounter, scientists built models based largely on incomplete information. The logic seemed reasonable. Solar energy drives weather on Earth. The sun heats oceans and continents unevenly, generating pressure differences that create wind. Warmth powers atmospheric circulation. Remove enough sunlight, and the engine weakens. At Neptune's distance, sunlight is extraordinarily faint. The planet receives only about 0.1% of the solar energy Earth receives. 001 IE. By ordinary intuition, Neptune should have possessed a lethargic atmosphere. Thin cloud movement, slow circulation, minimal turbulence. Instead, scientists eventually discovered a planetary system behaving with astonishing aggression. The first clues appeared gradually through improved telescopic observations during the late 20th century. Bright cloud structures were moving unexpectedly fast. Atmospheric bands shifted over surprisingly short periods of time. Subtle changes suggested a climate system far more active than anticipated. But the true shock arrived in 1989. Voyager 2 had already crossed the solar system for 12 years by then. 12 years drifting through darkness. It passed Jupiter in 1979, Saturn in 1981, Uranus in 1986, and finally, after travelling farther than any previous spacecraft in human history, it reached Neptune. The encounter lasted only briefly. Humanity's entire close-range study of Neptune still depends largely on a flyby measured in hours. That fact alone reveals something profound about the scale of the outer solar system. Entire scientific careers passed between Voyager's launch and its arrival at Neptune. Some of the engineers who helped design the mission were elderly before the data fully returned to Earth, because distance transforms exploration into patience, and patience into generations. When Voyager 2 finally transmitted its images back across billions of kilometers, Neptune immediately shattered expectations. The planet was alive with weather. A massive dark storm rotated through the southern hemisphere. Scientists called it the Great Dark Spot. It resembled Jupiter's Great Red Spot at first glance. But there was something psychologically colder about Neptune's version. Jupiter's storms exist within a comparatively warm and bright environment. Sunlight still floods Jupiter's cloud tops. Its atmosphere glows gold and orange beneath solar illumination. Neptune's storms unfold in deep twilight. The Great Dark Spot itself was enormous, roughly the size of Earth. An atmospheric vortex large enough to consume entire continents, spinning endlessly through freezing methane clouds, more than 4 billion kilometers from the Sun, and surrounding it were bright white clouds composed partly of methane ice crystals, not water clouds. Frozen methane. Even the chemistry begins drifting beyond ordinary human experience here. On Earth, methane is associated with fuel pipelines, wetlands, invisible gas leaks. On Neptune, methane becomes part of the weather itself. Atmospheric temperatures plunge so low that substances humans experience as gases become frozen particles suspended inside alien cloud systems. Yet despite those extreme temperatures, the atmosphere moved with astonishing speed. Voyager measured winds reaching approximately 100 km per hour, V2100 kmh. These were the fastest sustained winds ever detected on any planet in the solar system, and the deeper implication disturbed scientists immediately. Neptune simply should not possess enough available solar energy to generate such motion. The equations became uncomfortable. The farther from the Sun a planet travels, the weaker solar heating becomes. This should reduce atmospheric turbulence. Yet Neptune's winds exceeded those on planets receiving vastly greater amounts of solar energy. Something else was happening. Some hidden engine was feeding the atmosphere from below. And this realization quietly transformed Neptune from a distant curiosity into a scientific mystery. Because once the familiar explanation collapsed, the entire emotional model of the planet began collapsing with it. The outer solar system was not becoming quieter with distance. It was becoming stranger. Scientists eventually discovered that Neptune radiates significantly more energy into space than it receives from the Sun, almost twice as much. E out. 2E in. This meant Neptune generates substantial internal heat, a hidden planetary furnace buried beneath unimaginable pressures. Exactly how this heat escapes and how it powers such violent atmospheric motion remains only partially understood even now, and uncertainty matters. People often imagine science as a collection of completed answers, but the deeper humanity looks into the universe, the more reality transforms into layered ambiguity. Neptune exists inside one of those layers. Scientists understand many mechanisms individually: atmospheric chemistry, fluid dynamics, planetary formation, heat transfer, but combining them into a complete picture remains extraordinarily difficult, especially on a world humans have barely visited, especially across distances so immense that every observation arrives delayed by hours of light travel, and this delay subtly changes the emotional character of exploration itself. When astronomers observe Neptune, they never see the planet as it is now. They see it as it was over 4 hours ago. Every image is already history. Every storm has already evolved. Every cloud formation already belongs to the past. The outer solar system introduces a strange kind of loneliness into observation, not merely physical separation, temporal separation, reality occurring far away and long ago simultaneously, and Neptune continues moving through that darkness whether humans observe it or not. Storms forming, clouds collapsing, supersonic winds crossing a frozen atmosphere beneath a dying sunlight too weak to explain any of it completely. The deeper the observations became, the less Neptune resembled a frozen outer relic, and the more it resembled something vast, active, hidden, and profoundly indifferent to the assumptions humans carried outward from Earth. The unsettling part about Neptune is not merely that scientists were surprised, it is how completely their expectations failed. The failure itself reveals something uncomfortable about the human mind. People naturally assume that reality becomes simpler as it becomes colder. We imagine warmth as the source of complexity. Tropical storms form over warm oceans. Biological diversity thrives in equatorial sunlight. Activity, motion, instability all appear emotionally connected to heat. Coldness feels synonymous with silence, but Neptune quietly dismantles that assumption. Because the deeper scientists study the planet, the clearer it became that coldness alone does not create stillness. In some cases, it creates entirely different forms of violence. And this is where the familiar mental picture of a planet begins breaking apart. On Earth, weather unfolds above a solid surface. Mountains redirect winds, oceans absorb heat, continents shape storms. Humans instinctively imagine atmospheres as thin layers floating above ground. Neptune possesses no such boundary. Descending into Neptune is less like entering an atmosphere and more like falling into a planet-sized ocean of pressure. At first, there are visible cloud tops, high-altitude methane haze illuminated faintly by distant sunlight, white streaks of frozen methane crystals drifting through blue atmospheric bands. But beneath those upper layers, pressure increases relentlessly. The atmosphere thickens, hydrogen, helium, methane, gas becoming denser, denser becoming fluid, fluid becoming something increasingly difficult to classify using ordinary language. And nowhere does a traveller encounter a true surface. There is no moment when sky becomes land. Instead, Neptune transitions gradually into deeper and deeper states of compression until the distinction between atmosphere and planetary interior loses meaning entirely. This alone already separates Neptune psychologically from Earth. Human beings evolved on stable surfaces. Every structure of civilization assumes the existence of solid ground. Roads, cities, borders, agriculture, architecture, even language itself all depend on fixed geography. Neptune offers none, only descent, only pressure, only increasing darkness. And inside that darkness, physics itself begins behaving in ways almost impossible to emotionally visualize. Temperatures in Neptune's upper atmosphere can fall below -200 degrees Celsius, T200C, yet deeper within the planet, temperatures rise dramatically under crushing pressure. Thousands of kilometers beneath the cloud tops, scientists believe Neptune may contain enormous layers of superheated exotic fluids, mixtures of water, ammonia, and methane compressed into states unlike anything naturally occurring on Earth's surface. People sometimes hear the phrase ice giant and imagine something simple, a frozen sphere, a colossal snow-covered world. But planetary ice in astronomy often refers not to frozen solids humans recognize, but to volatile compounds compressed under extreme conditions. The ices inside Neptune may exist as electrically conductive fluids hotter than molten lava, and the pressure there becomes almost incomprehensible, millions of times stronger than Earth's atmospheric pressure, enough to fundamentally alter atomic behavior itself. This is where human visualization begins failing catastrophically, because ordinary experience provides no emotional reference point for planetary interiors. Humans can imagine oceans because oceans exist on Earth. We can imagine deserts, storms, mountains, volcanoes, but Neptune's depths belong to another category entirely, not because they're supernatural, but because reality itself exceeds the environments biological brains evolved to process. And perhaps nowhere is this more psychologically disturbing than in the strange possibility of diamond rain. Deep inside Neptune, scientists believe immense pressure may break apart methane molecules. Carbon atoms separate, compress, and potentially crystallize into diamonds. Not tiny gemstones, but enormous masses of diamond descending slowly through superheated planetary layers beneath thousands of kilometers of atmosphere. CH4. The universe repeatedly generates beauty in forms completely detached from human meaning. On Earth, diamonds symbolize rarity, wealth, permanence, romance, entire economies and social rituals formed around them. Inside Neptune, they may simply fall endlessly through darkness like rain. No observer, no purpose, no civilization present to assign value. Only physics unfolding automatically inside a world that existed long before humanity emerged and will likely continue long after humanity disappears. And still the storms continue above. This is where Neptune becomes psychologically dangerous to contemplate, because it forces a confrontation with scale operating independently of human importance. A storm on Earth is measured partly by its effect on civilization. Damage, flooding, death tolls, infrastructure collapse. Human suffering defines the emotional meaning of weather, but Neptune's atmosphere operates without witnesses. Its storms rage through emptiness. Its winds scream across a world no human being has ever touched. Even Voyager 2 merely passed by briefly before continuing outward into deeper darkness, and this creates an unsettling realization. Most of reality unfolds without us, not merely beyond us physically, beyond us conceptually. Human beings often unconsciously imagine observation as central to existence. We describe the universe in relation to what it means for human life. Habitable planets, dangerous asteroids, useful resources, survival. But Neptune reminds us that the cosmos was never designed around human perception. The storms there do not occur for anyone. The violence is indifferent, automatic, ancient, and possibly eternal on timescales exceeding civilizations themselves. Some Neptunian storms appear and disappear over years or decades. Entire atmospheric systems emerge, migrate and collapse while human societies on Earth undergo political upheavals, technological revolutions, economic crises, and generational change. Meanwhile, Neptune continues orbiting silently through the outer darkness. 1 year there lasting longer than modern industrial civilization has existed. This destroys ordinary intuition about time. Human life feels long from inside itself. Entire lifetimes contain emotional depth, memory, suffering, love, ambition, identity. Civilizations rise believing themselves permanent. Nations imagine historical importance. Economies expand with assumptions of continuity, but Neptune exists on planetary timescales, slow, immense, detached from biological urgency. And the farther scientists looked, the stranger the implications became. Because Neptune's atmosphere is not merely violent, it is unstable. The great dark spot discovered by Voyager eventually vanished. Gone. Other storms later appeared elsewhere across the planet. Massive atmospheric systems forming and dissolving inside a climate scientists still struggle to predict fully. Even now, advanced telescopes continue observing unexpected changes in Neptune's atmosphere. Cloud activity fluctuates in ways not entirely understood. Dark vortices migrate unpredictably. Seasonal shifts unfold over decades and centuries. The planet remains partially mysterious, not because science has failed, but because reality is genuinely complicated, especially across scales this enormous, especially on worlds humanity has barely touched. And this may be the deeper emotional lesson Neptune quietly imposes, that the universe is not obligated to become more understandable simply because humans are intelligent enough to study it. Knowledge expands, but so does uncertainty. Every layer removed reveals another beneath it. Every answer exposes larger structures still hidden below. And Neptune, cold and distant beneath a fading sun, continues waiting at the edge of human comprehension like a reminder that reality itself may be far more active. Alien and psychologically immense than civilization naturally prefers to believe. Distance becomes psychologically dangerous long before it becomes physically dangerous. This is one of the first truths hidden inside the outer solar system. Human beings evolved within small ranges of survival. Villages separated by rivers once felt remote. Oceans seemed infinite. Entire civilizations formed without crossing continents. The nervous system learned scale through walking distances, seasonal migrations, visible horizons, and lifespans short enough that even neighbouring kingdoms could feel permanently unreachable. Modern technology partially conceals this limitation. Aircraft compress continents into hours, satellites erase communication delays, digital maps shrink the planet into gestures of the hand, and slowly humanity begins confusing connectivity with mastery. But Neptune restores the original scale of reality. Not metaphorically, physically. Its average distance from Earth varies enormously depending on orbital positions, but even under favourable alignment, Neptune remains more than 4 billion kilometres away. D4 by 9 kilometres, the Apollo astronauts reached the Moon in days. Voyager 2 required 12 years to reach Neptune. New Horizons, one of the fastest spacecraft ever launched by humanity, still needed nearly a decade simply to cross the outer solar system toward Pluto. Even light, the fastest thing known in the universe, moves slowly across these scales. A radio message transmitted from Earth requires over 4 hours to arrive at Neptune. Another 4 hours for the response to return. A single conversation with a spacecraft there would contain delays longer than an entire workday on Earth. And this transforms the emotional meaning of isolation. People often describe Earth as isolated in space. But Earth still exists deep within the warm centre of the Sun's gravitational dominion. Sunlight arrives in 8 minutes. Communication satellites orbit nearby. Human beings remain surrounded by an active biosphere. Flowing oceans, weather systems, and billions of other living organisms. Neptune exists in a different category of loneliness. Out there, the Sun begins losing emotional authority. This is difficult for the human brain to process because sunlight defines nearly every biological intuition humans possess. Brightness signals safety. Warmth signals life. Daylight shapes circadian rhythms, emotional states, and evolutionary behaviour. But at Neptune, sunlight becomes thin, weak, emotionally distant. The sun no longer dominates the sky as a radiant force. Instead, it resembles a brilliant star suspended in overwhelming blackness. And the blackness itself becomes immense. This is where scale ceases being numerical and becomes existential. Between planets lies mostly emptiness, not the kind of emptiness humans encounter in deserts or oceans, where air, water, sound, weather, and gravity still surround the body. Space contains a far deeper isolation, no breathable atmosphere, no pressure, no sound transmission, no organic environment evolved for life, and the farther outward one travels, the more absolute that emptiness becomes. If Earth were reduced to the size of a grain of sand, Neptune would still orbit kilometers away. Most diagrams conceal this by compressing planetary distances beyond recognition. Otherwise, the solar system would become too large to fit meaningfully onto a page. But the emotional consequence of that compression is severe. It teaches people the wrong intuition. The planets are not neighbours. They are separated islands drifting through colossal darkness, and Neptune is one of the most distant major islands still illuminated by the sun at all. The farther Voyager 2 travelled outward, the stranger the solar system became. Jupiter still felt powerful and bright beneath reflected sunlight. Saturn retained a kind of majestic familiarity with its rings glowing gold against darkness. Even Uranus, tilted strangely on its side, remained emotionally connected to the interplanetary architecture, but Neptune felt different, remote in a way the earlier planets did not. There is a psychological threshold where distance stops feeling measurable and starts feeling irreversible. Neptune lies near that threshold. By the time Voyager approached it in 1989, the spacecraft's nuclear power source had already been operating for over a decade. Some onboard systems were aging. Engineers on Earth understood that every command required patience. Every transmission crossed billions of kilometers of vacuum. The spacecraft itself became lonely, a machine carrying human curiosity outward into regions where human beings could never naturally survive. And yet even Voyager's extraordinary journey barely penetrated Neptune's domain. Because Neptune is not simply a planet. It is an entire system. The planet possesses rings faint, dark structures difficult to observe from Earth. Not the bright, majestic rings of Saturn, but incomplete arcs and dusty bands orbiting silently in the darkness. It possesses moons as well. 14 known moons, and among them, Triton may be one of the strangest objects in the solar system. Triton orbits Neptune backward, retrograde. While most major moons orbit in the same direction their planet rotates. Triton moves against Neptune's rotation, suggesting it was not born there at all. Scientists believe Triton was likely captured long ago from the Kuiper Belt, the immense region of icy bodies beyond Neptune. A stolen moon, an object wandering through deep space until Neptune's gravity trapped it permanently. Even here, the solar system reveals violence hidden beneath apparent order. Planetary systems are not static architectures peacefully assembled into harmony. They are survivors of ancient chaos. Worlds captured, moons destroyed, orbits altered, objects flung outward into interstellar darkness. And Neptune still carries scars from that early instability. Triton itself is deeply unsettling. Its surface temperature falls near minus 235 degrees Celsius. T235c. This makes it one of the coldest known objects in the solar system. Yet Voyager observed active geysers erupting from its frozen surface. Black plumes rising kilometers high through nitrogen ice beneath an almost non-existent sunlight. Again the pattern repeats. The universe refuses stillness. Even here, even near absolute cold, activity persists, motion persists, instability persists, and beyond Triton, the darkness expands further still. Neptune marks the beginning of the outer frontier rather than its conclusion. Beyond its orbit stretches the Kuiper Belt Duran, containing countless frozen remnants from the solar system's formation. Farther still may lie the hypothetical Oort cloud, a vast spherical shell of icy objects extending perhaps a light-year from the Sun itself. This means Neptune does not truly sit at the edge of the solar system. It merely exists near the edge of what humans emotionally recognize as the solar system, and that distinction matters profoundly, because reality is always larger than intuition first allows. The farther science explores outward, the more Earth shrinks psychologically. Human civilization feels enormous from inside itself. Nations span continents. Cities contain millions of lives. Histories stretch across millennia. Human conflicts appear consuming and permanent. But Neptune quietly reveals another perspective. All human wars, all empires, all religions, all languages, all recorded history. Every moment of civilization unfolded while this blue world continued orbiting silently through darkness billions of kilometers away. Wrapped in storms larger than Earth itself, entire human generations were born and disappeared before sunlight completed a single Neptunian season, and Neptune does not notice. The storms continue regardless. The winds continue regardless. The atmosphere shifts endlessly beneath a dim star that grows weaker with every outward kilometer. This is where scale begins eroding emotional certainty. Because the universe is not merely larger than humanity expected, it is larger than human psychology was designed to comfortably contain. By the time scientists began seriously modelling Neptune's atmosphere, a troubling pattern had already emerged. The equations worked individually, but together they produced contradictions. This is often how reality announces its deeper complexity, not through dramatic revelations, but through small, persistent failures in understanding, measurements refusing to align, predictions collapsing under observation, familiar mechanisms operating correctly in one environment and breaking apart completely in another. Neptune became one of those environments. The basic physics initially seemed straightforward enough. Like the other giant planets, Neptune is composed primarily of hydrogen and helium, with smaller amounts of methane and other compounds mixed throughout the atmosphere. Methane plays a critical role in the planet's appearance. It absorbs red wavelengths of sunlight while reflecting blue light back into space, giving Neptune its deep cobalt coloration. But the beauty of Neptune's blue atmosphere conceals an environment of extraordinary hostility. Temperatures in the upper cloud layers remain cold enough to freeze methane into crystalline particles. Atmospheric pressures fluctuate violently across enormous vertical distances. Wind systems interact with internal heat sources scientists still do not completely understand. And perhaps most importantly, Neptune possesses no stable lower boundary to calm atmospheric circulation. On Earth, storms eventually interact with continents, mountains, oceans, or surface friction. These interactions dissipate energy. Hurricanes weaken after landfall because the systems lose their thermal support and encounter resistance from terrain. Neptune offers almost no such interruption. Its atmosphere can circulate continuously around the planet with astonishing freedom. This partially explains the extreme wind speeds, but only partially, because even accounting for atmospheric structure, Neptune's storms still appear disproportionately violent for a planet receiving so little solar energy. And this leads directly to one of the most unsettling scientific realities about Neptune. Much of its energy comes from inside itself. The planet radiates roughly 2.6 times more energy than it receives from the Sun. E out, 6E in, somewhere beneath the visible atmosphere. Neptune contains hidden reservoirs of internal heat powerful enough to sustain massive atmospheric circulation across billions of years. But where does this heat come from? The answer appears to involve the violent history of planetary formation itself. Roughly 4.5 billion years ago, the solar system was not orderly. It was catastrophic. Young planets collided repeatedly inside dense clouds of gas and debris. Massive gravitational interactions flung objects across enormous distances. Heat accumulated through compression, radioactive decay, and impacts powerful enough to melt entire worlds. Neptune formed within that violence, and some of that primordial heat still survives deep inside the planet even now. This fact alone carries strange emotional implications. Human civilization measures time through generations. Ancient history feels remote at a few thousand years. Geological processes already challenge ordinary comprehension when stretched across millions of years. But Neptune still contains thermal energy left over from the birth of the solar system itself. The planet remembers conditions older than Earth's oceans, older than multicellular life, older than every mountain range humans have ever seen. Inside Neptune, ancient heat continues leaking outward from an era before biology even existed on Earth. And as this heat rises through the atmosphere, it drives motion. Convective currents form, hotter material rises, cooler material sinks. Storm systems organize across enormous scales. Jet streams accelerate through pressure gradients spanning thousands of kilometers. The resulting winds become almost incomprehensibly fast. Yet even now, scientists struggle to fully explain why Neptune's atmosphere appears more dynamic than Uranus's atmosphere, despite the two planets being similar in size and composition. This comparison deeply unsettled planetary scientists. Uranus and Neptune are often grouped together as ice giants. They possess comparable masses, similar atmospheric chemistry, and related formation histories, and yet Uranus appears comparatively subdued. Its atmosphere looks calmer, its internal heat weaker, its visible storms less dramatic for long periods of observation. Neptune, meanwhile, behaves with persistent instability. The difference may result partly from Uranus's extreme axial tilt. Long ago, something enormous likely struck Uranus hard enough to tip the planet sideways. Today, Uranus rotates almost horizontally relative to its orbit. Neptune avoided that fate. Its internal structure may therefore remain more efficient at transporting heat outward, but certainty remains elusive. The deeper the models become, the more Neptune resists simplification. This is one reason planetary science remains emotionally fascinating. Not because scientists lack intelligence, but because nature itself contains layers of interaction so complex that complete understanding becomes extraordinarily difficult, even with advanced mathematics and powerful telescopes. Fluid dynamics alone already produces immense unpredictability. Turbulence is notoriously difficult to model accurately even on Earth. Tiny changes can propagate into large-scale atmospheric differences over time. Now extend those equations across an entire giant planet. Add exotic chemistry, extreme pressure, internal heating, rapid rotation, minimal solar energy, no solid surface, and the atmosphere transforms into one of the most complicated systems humans have ever attempted to understand. Neptune rotates rapidly despite its enormous size. One full rotation requires only about 16 hours. Titan 16 hours. This rapid spin creates powerful Coriolis effects that organize atmospheric motion into bands and vortices. Storm systems stretch and twist around the planet. Jet streams stabilize at certain latitudes, while chaotic turbulence dominates others. The Great Dark Spot observed by Voyager likely represented a massive high-pressure vortex similar in some respects to hurricanes on Earth. But unlike terrestrial storms, Neptune's atmospheric systems can span planetary scales largely unconstrained by land masses or oceans, and the planet's weather changes faster than scientists once thought possible. Some dark storms disappear entirely within only a few years, others suddenly emerge elsewhere. Bright methane clouds appear unexpectedly at high altitudes, and then fade again into darkness. Even modern observations from the NASA and the European Southern Observatory continue detecting atmospheric changes that are difficult to predict confidently. Neptune remains alive with meteorology, but perhaps the strangest scientific reality of all is how little direct data humanity actually possesses. One flyby, that is still the foundation of most close-range Neptune science. Voyager 2 remains the only spacecraft ever to visit the planet. No orbiter has followed. No atmospheric probe has descended into its clouds. No lander could survive its depths even if one existed. Humanity's understanding of Neptune therefore depends heavily on remote observation, computer modeling, laboratory physics, and inference. This creates an unusual relationship between knowledge and uncertainty. Scientists understand many aspects of Neptune extremely well individually. Spectroscopy reveals atmospheric composition. Orbital dynamics constrain mass and structure. Infrared observations map thermal behavior. But the complete living system of the planet remains partially hidden, and hidden things exert psychological pressure, especially when they're enormous. Especially when they are violent. especially when they exist billions of kilometers away in darkness cold enough to freeze chemistry itself into alien forms. Because Neptune ultimately reveals a difficult truth about science. The universe does not become less mysterious simply because humans learn more about it. In many cases, knowledge expands mystery faster than it eliminates it. Each discovery exposes deeper mechanisms. Each mechanism reveals larger unanswered structures. And Neptune continues turning silently beneath its supersonic storms, carrying ancient heat outward through a freezing atmosphere, while humanity watches from a small warm planet near the sun, still trying to understand how such violence can survive so far from the light. What most people never realize is that Neptune's violence is not merely an atmospheric phenomenon. It is a warning about how easily human intuition breaks when removed from Earth. On this planet, energy feels visible, heat arrives from above, weather follows recognizable cycles. Human beings experience reality through biological scales shaped by sunlight, gravity, and survival across narrow environmental limits. But Neptune belongs to a universe outside those limits, and once scientists understood that the planet remained violently active despite receiving almost no solar warmth, a larger implication quietly emerged. The cosmos does not require conditions comfortable to humans in order to remain dynamic. This realization changes far more than planetary science. It changes humanity's emotional relationship with the universe itself. For centuries, warmth and activity felt psychologically connected. Civilizations flourished in fertile climates. Life gathered around rivers, sunlight, and temperate zones. Cold landscapes appeared empty, lifeless, hostile. The outer solar system therefore became emotionally categorized as dead territory. A frozen graveyard beyond the meaningful reach of the sun, Neptune destroyed that emotional simplification, because beneath its dim skies, enormous systems continue operating with astonishing complexity. Atmospheric circulation, internal heating, magnetic instability, planetary-scale storms, and all of it unfolds in a region where sunlight has weakened almost into irrelevance. This forces an uncomfortable philosophical transition. Human beings unconsciously assume life and meaning occupy the center of activity in the universe. But Neptune suggests that motion itself is indifferent to life. Violence occurs naturally, complexity occurs naturally, instability occurs naturally, even when nobody exists to witness it. This is where scale begins becoming emotionally destabilizing. Consider the Great Dark Spot again. An atmospheric vortex approximately the size of Earth itself rotating through Neptune's atmosphere. Entire civilizations could disappear beneath a storm system that, on Neptune, was only one temporary feature among many. And even more unsettling, the storm eventually vanished. The atmosphere erased it. A structure large enough to consume our entire planet dissolved silently inside a world humanity can barely observe. This reveals something profound about planetary scale. Human beings measure importance through human consequence. Wars matter because people suffer. Hurricanes matter because cities flood. Geological disasters matter because civilizations collapse. But Neptune's storms unfold beyond consequence. No ecosystems depend on them. No societies fear them. No observers stand beneath the clouds. The violence is entirely self-contained, automatic. And this autonomy creates existential discomfort because it removes humanity from the center of meaning. The universe does not require witnesses to remain active. It does not require consciousness to produce beauty, chaos, or catastrophe. Neptune's storms were raging long before humans evolved. They continued while the first mammals emerged on Earth. While dinosaurs vanished, while continents drifted, while civilizations rose beside rivers, and they will likely continue long after modern humanity disappears. The emotional scale of this becomes difficult to contain, because human history feels enormous from within itself. Entire generations dedicate their lives to political systems, economies, ideologies, technologies, identities. Nations imagine permanence. Civilizations document themselves obsessively in the hope of resisting time. Meanwhile, Neptune completes one orbit every 165 Earth years. T=sine 165 years. Modern industrial civilization has not yet survived a full Neptunian year. When Neptune last occupied its current position relative to the Sun, humanity had barely begun understanding electricity. This perspective quietly erodes the emotional solidity of civilization itself, not because human life lacks meaning internally, but because cosmic scales reveal how localized that meaning truly is. And Neptune intensifies this realization because it exists so far from biological reality altogether. Earth still offers comforting illusions of centrality. Oceans teem with life. Forests breathe. Weather interacts with ecosystems. Human beings remain surrounded by evidence that the universe accommodates living organisms. Neptune offers no such reassurance. Its atmosphere crushes. Its temperatures freeze chemistry into alien forms. Its pressures exceed anything humans can physically survive. The deeper one descends into Neptune, the more completely human biology becomes irrelevant. And yet the planet remains profoundly active despite that irrelevance. This is psychologically important, because many human philosophies unconsciously assume that complexity and richness belong primarily to living worlds. But Neptune demonstrates that lifeless environments can also possess staggering complexity. Not emotional complexity, not moral complexity, physical complexity. And physical complexity alone can become overwhelming. Scientists studying Neptune encounter systems operating across scales difficult even to simulate computationally. Turbulence interacts with chemistry. Internal heat transfer affects atmospheric circulation. Magnetic behavior becomes unstable in ways unlike Earth. Even Neptune's magnetic field behaves strangely. Unlike Earth's relatively organized magnetic structure, Neptune's magnetic field is dramatically tilted and offset from the planet's center. E47. The magnetic poles do not align neatly with rotational poles. Instead, the field twists through space irregularly, producing highly unusual magnetospheric behavior. Scientists believe this may result from electrically conductive oceans deep within the planet. Again, Neptune refuses simplicity. The farther inward science looks, the more alien the mechanisms become. And this alienness carries another hidden implication. Human intuition about normal reality is extraordinarily provincial. Earth feels normal because humans evolved here. But Earth may actually represent only a tiny specialized subset of what planets can become. The universe contains gas giants, ice giants, rogue planets drifting without stars, worlds orbiting dead suns, planets locked permanently facing one hemisphere towards eternal daylight, while the other freezes in endless night. And Neptune exists somewhere near the threshold where human familiarity begins collapsing into cosmic diversity. This is one reason the outer planets feel emotionally unsettling, not merely because they're dangerous, but because they expose how narrow human experience truly is. A child can look at Neptune through a telescope and still emotionally interpret it as another planet. But scientifically, psychologically, philosophically, it belongs to a category of reality radically different from the environment that shaped human consciousness. And beyond Neptune, things only become stranger. Past the orbit of the blue planet lies the Kuiper Belt, a vast region of icy remnants left over from planetary formation. Pluto drifts there in dim sunlight. Countless frozen bodies orbit slowly through darkness. Farther still, sunlight weakens into something almost meaningless. Eventually, even the giant planets disappear behind you. The sun shrinks, the warmth vanishes, and the solar system transforms into a sparse scattering of cold objects surrounded by enormous volumes of emptiness. Neptune therefore represents more than a distant planet. It represents a psychological transition point, the last major world before the true outer darkness begins. And yet even there, even in those remote freezing regions, the universe remains violently active. This may be the deepest hidden implication of Neptune. Reality does not become gentler with distance from life. It simply becomes less human. This is where the scale becomes psychologically dangerous, because Neptune is not isolated merely by distance. It is isolated by context. Human beings instinctively imagine the solar system as the primary structure of existence. The sun feels enormous. The planets feel monumental. Even the outer darkness appears emotionally anchored by the presence of our star. But Neptune begins quietly dissolving that illusion at Earth's distance. Sunlight dominates reality completely. The sky itself glows blue because solar radiation scatters through the atmosphere. Biological clocks synchronize to daylight cycles. Weather systems depend on solar heating. Civilization rises and sleeps beneath the predictable movement of the sun. Near Neptune, that certainty weakens. The sun remains physically powerful, certainly. Its gravity still governs planetary orbits. Its fusion still powers the entire solar system. But emotionally, the sun begins feeling remote. The brightness fades first. At Neptune, daylight resembles the dim illumination of terrestrial twilight. Shadows soften. Contrast weakens. The immense warmth governing life on Earth collapses into a pale, distant glare, barely stronger than other stars surrounding it. And once the sun stops dominating perception, the scale of surrounding darkness becomes almost unbearable to contemplate fully. Because space is not merely large, it is mostly empty. The region between Earth and Neptune already exceeds ordinary human comprehension. Yet even that enormous gulf represents only a tiny fraction of the solar system itself. Beyond Neptune lies the Kuiper Belt, a vast halo of icy remnants left behind during planetary formation. Millions of frozen objects orbit there. Some as small as mountains, others approach planetary scale. Most drift silently through darkness untouched for billions of years. Pluto exists within this region. So do Eris, Makemake, Haumea, and countless unnamed bodies still undiscovered. Human beings often imagine discovery as nearly complete. Modern civilization projects an image of mapped certainty. Satellites surround Earth. Telescopes scan galaxies. Artificial intelligence processes astronomical data across enormous scales. And yet the outer solar system still contains objects humanity has never seen. Entire worlds may remain hidden in darkness simply because sunlight there is too weak for easy detection. This realization begins changing the emotional structure of reality itself. Because the farther outward science looks, the less Earth resembles the center of existence. It becomes a warm exception inside overwhelming coldness. Neptune intensifies this feeling because it occupies a transitional zone between the familiar planetary system and something vastly more diffuse. The Kuiper Belt alone may extend from roughly 30 to 55 astronomical units from the Sun. 30 are 55 One astronomical unit is the average distance between Earth and the Sun. Already the numbers become emotionally unstable. Distances stop feeling navigable and begin feeling geological in scale. Yet even the Kuiper Belt is not the true boundary of the solar system. Far beyond Neptune, beyond Pluto, beyond the frozen debris fields, scientists believe another structure surrounds the Sun entirely. The Oort cloud, a hypothetical spherical shell of icy objects extending perhaps 1 light-year into space. Our 1 light-year? This is difficult to emotionally process because human intuition still treats the solar system as relatively compact. But if the Oort cloud exists as predicted, then Neptune orbits deep inside only the inner regions of the Sun's true gravitational territory, and suddenly Neptune itself begins looking small. This is the psychological escalation hidden inside astronomy. Every frontier becomes interior when viewed from a larger scale. For ancient civilizations, Earth appeared central, then Earth became one planet among several, then the solar system became one system among billions, then the galaxy became one structure among trillions. Reality continuously expands faster than intuition can stabilize, and Neptune sits precisely at one of those destabilizing thresholds. Because standing emotionally beside Neptune means confronting the fact that human beings evolved astonishingly close to the center of local warmth. Earth is protected by atmosphere, protected by magnetic fields, protected by oceans, protected by solar proximity. The outer solar system strips away those protections gradually. At Jupiter, radiation becomes deadly. At Saturn, sunlight weakens severely. At Uranus, darkness deepens. And by Neptune, the environment begins resembling interstellar space far more than Earth. The temperature of empty space itself hovers only slightly above absolute zero. 7K. The universe is fundamentally cold. This may be one of the hardest scientific truths for humans to emotionally absorb because biology evolved inside localized warmth. Every living organism on Earth exists because our planet occupies a narrow thermal refuge around a stable star. But outside those refuges, the cosmos becomes overwhelmingly hostile. Neptune exists near the outer edge of that refuge, and still, despite the cold, despite the darkness, despite the immense isolation, the planet remains violently active. This contradiction creates existential pressure, because humans instinctively associate warmth with vitality. Yet Neptune demonstrates that physical activity does not require comfort, biology, or sunlight strong enough to sustain life. Storms still form, heat still rises, magnetic fields still twist. Gravity still shapes colossal structures through billions of years. The universe continues moving whether life participates or not, and this realization quietly dismantles anthropocentrism at a deep psychological level. Human beings naturally interpret reality through human significance. History textbooks center civilizations. Philosophies center consciousness. Religions center meaning. But Neptune belongs to a cosmos where enormous processes unfold independently of human existence entirely. Its storms do not know humanity exists. Its winds do not care whether civilizations survive. The planet rotated beneath darkness for billions of years before the first human being ever looked upward. And even now, almost all of Neptune's existence occurs unwitnessed. This may be the most emotionally overwhelming aspect of astronomy. Most of reality happens alone. Entire planetary systems evolve without observers. Stars collapse in distant galaxies unseen. Black holes consume matter across millions of years in silence. Frozen worlds drift endlessly through darkness beyond all biological perception. The cosmos is not staged for human experience, and Neptune marks one of the first places in the solar system where that truth becomes emotionally unavoidable, especially when one considers the scale of time involved. Neptune formed approximately 4.5 billion years ago. T4 5-body 10 9 years. At that time, Earth itself was barely cooling from formation. No oceans existed yet, no forests, no animals, no nervous systems capable of fear or wonder. While life slowly evolved across billions of years on Earth, Neptune remained there in the darkness, carrying ancient heat beneath frozen clouds. When dinosaurs ruled Earth, Neptune circled silently through distant twilight. When the first mammals emerged, the storms continued. When human beings discovered fire, invented agriculture, crossed oceans, built cities, launched telescopes, Neptune remained almost unchanged. Entire species appear temporary against planetary timescales. Civilizations become microscopic. Even recorded history shrinks into an instant. And perhaps this is why Neptune feels emotionally different from the inner planets. Mars still invites projection. People imagine colonies there, human footprints, exploration. But Neptune resists emotional domestication. It is too remote, too cold, too alien, too enormous. It does not feel like a future human frontier. It feels like a reminder that most of the universe exists beyond biological comfort, beyond civilization, beyond the fragile warm conditions humans unconsciously mistake for normal reality. And beyond Neptune itself, the darkness only deepens further. After enough exposure to cosmic scale, something subtle begins happening to the human mind. Civilization starts feeling temporary, not emotionally at first. Emotionally, human life still appears enormous from within itself. Nations rise and collapse beneath intense historical pressure. Economies fluctuate. Technologies transform daily existence within generations. Political conflicts consume attention so completely that they appear world-defining, but planetary timescales dissolve this emotional immediacy. And Neptune accelerates that dissolution. Because Neptune exists on scales where human history barely registers at all. Its storms are older than nations. Its internal heat predates complex life on Earth. Its orbit unfolds so slowly that entire eras of civilization pass during a single season. This creates a strange psychological reversal. Ordinarily, humanity imagines itself observing the universe. But at sufficient scale, it begins feeling more accurate to say the universe simply continues while humanity briefly occurs inside it. Neptune embodies this feeling with unsettling clarity. The planet does not participate in human urgency. It does not react to human existence. It does not even acknowledge the biological distinction humans place between life and non-life. Physics operates there continuously regardless of observation, meaning, morality, or survival. And this realization can become emotionally destabilizing because civilization depends heavily on the illusion of permanence. Cities are built as though they will endure indefinitely. Governments behave as though historical continuity is natural. Individuals plan futures assuming civilization itself remains stable. Yet against planetary and cosmic timescales, human systems begin resembling weather, temporary arrangements, brief organizational patterns emerging and disappearing inside larger physical processes. Neptune helps reveal this because its own atmosphere demonstrates how instability can persist for billions of years without resolution. Storms form, storms vanish. Cloud systems migrate across hemispheres. Internal heat escapes gradually through turbulent circulation, and all of it occurs with complete indifference to human chronology. Consider the Great Dark Spot once more. When Voyager 2 observed it in 1989, the storm appeared immense and dominant. Scientists naturally compared it to Jupiter's Great Red Spot, which has survived for centuries, but later observations revealed that Neptune's Great Dark Spot had disappeared entirely, gone into atmospheric history. This disappearance carried unexpected emotional weight for scientists because it revealed Neptune's climate system to be more dynamic and unstable than anticipated. Even planetary-scale structures are temporary. The implication extends far beyond meteorology. Human beings often unconsciously search for permanence in the universe. Stable truths, eternal structures, lasting systems. But reality repeatedly demonstrates the opposite. Stars exhaust their fuel, galaxies collide, planets migrate, moons fracture, atmospheres evolve. Nothing remains fixed indefinitely. And Neptune exists inside that universal instability. The planet itself likely formed much closer to the Sun than where it orbits today. Many modern planetary formation models suggest the giant planets migrated dramatically during the solar system's early history. Jupiter's immense gravity may have destabilized entire regions of forming planets. Neptune itself may have been scattered outward through colossal gravitational interactions billions of years ago. In other words, even the architecture of the solar system was not stable originally. It emerged from chaos. This realization quietly transforms the emotional meaning of the night sky. The planets appear orderly because humans observe only a brief moment of cosmic history. But over immense spans of time, planetary systems behave dynamically. Worlds move, orbits shift, objects collide. Gravity rearranges everything. And Neptune may be one of the survivors of that ancient instability. This is where human perspective begins collapsing inward against cosmic scale. Because civilization often treats itself as historically central, people imagine their era uniquely important, their crises uniquely severe, their technologies uniquely transformative. Yet Neptune continued orbiting silently through darkness before human language existed. And it will likely continue long after modern civilization disappears. This is not pessimism. It is simply scale. Scale alters emotional proportion. The Industrial Revolution feels ancient from within human memory. But on Neptune, less than 2% of a single year has passed since it began. 165, 250. 1/5. The entire modern technological age occupies only a small fraction of one Neptunian orbit, and suddenly the continuity humans assume about civilization begins feeling fragile. Species themselves appear fragile. Homo sapiens has existed for roughly 300,000 years. T3 Septor 10, 5 years? That sounds immense emotionally. But Neptune has completed fewer than 2,000 orbits during the entire existence of modern humans, and the solar system itself is billions of years old. Again and again, scale reduces human certainty, not because human experiences lack meaning internally, but because cosmic reality exposes how narrow the human frame truly is. Even Earth's apparent stability becomes questionable under these perspectives. Planets are not eternal refuges. Atmospheres change, magnetic fields weaken, climate systems shift, stars evolve. One day the sun itself will begin dying. Long before that final collapse, Earth's oceans may evaporate beneath increasing solar luminosity. Surface temperatures will rise. Biological complexity may eventually disappear entirely. Meanwhile, Neptune's distant orbit could temporarily become warmer. In the remote future, as the sun expands into a red giant, the outer solar system may receive more energy than it does today. The frozen darkness surrounding Neptune could partially soften beneath a dying star's expanding heat. This reversal carries a strange emotional irony. Earth, the birthplace of human life, may eventually become uninhabitable while distant outer worlds receive brief episodes of comparative warmth. Nothing remains emotionally fixed in cosmic time. Habitability migrates, conditions evolve, stability dissolves, and perhaps the most unsettling realization is how ordinary this appears cosmically. The universe does not resist transformation. Human beings often emotionally associate catastrophe with abnormality. Disaster feels like interruption, but astronomy suggests instability is actually normal. Stars explode naturally, planets form violently, galaxies merge routinely, black holes consume matter continuously. Even Neptune's storms reflect this larger truth. Violence is not exceptional in the cosmos, it is foundational. And still, despite all this instability, human consciousness briefly emerged on one small planet close to a warm star. A temporary biological phenomenon capable of looking outward and recognizing its own fragility. This may be why Neptune feels emotionally haunting rather than merely scientifically interesting, because the planet quietly strips away comforting assumptions one by one. The assumption that warmth is normal, the assumption that civilization is durable, the assumption that life occupies a central role in cosmic activity, the assumption that human timescales matter universally. Under Neptune's perspective, humanity becomes local, temporary, a thin biological event occurring close to one ordinary star, while vast non-living systems continue operating across incomprehensible distances and durations. And beyond Neptune, the darkness remains almost entirely untouched by human presence at all. Neptune only appears distant when viewed from Earth. From a larger perspective, it still exists deep inside something much greater. This is one of the recurring psychological shocks of astronomy. Every time humanity believes it has approached an outer boundary, the boundary expands again. The horizon retreats. What once felt enormous becomes local. And Neptune, despite all its scale and violence, still orbits well within the Sun's gravitational empire. The solar system itself is not truly defined by planets. Planets are merely the bright visible structures humans notice first. The real architecture is gravity, an invisible field extending outward through darkness, binding objects across unimaginable distances. Every planet, moon, comet, asteroid, and drifting fragment participates in this vast gravitational system centered around the Sun. Even Neptune remains captive to it. At nearly 4.5 billion kilometers from the Sun, Neptune still requires about 165 Earth years to complete a single orbit. T2R3. The orbit is immense beyond ordinary emotional comprehension, yet gravity maintains it precisely. The planet falls endlessly around the Sun through a nearly frictionless vacuum, carrying its storms, moons, rings, and internal heat through darkness year after year, epoch after epoch. This stability feels comforting at first, but only briefly, because the deeper scientists examined the outer solar system, the clearer it became that even these enormous gravitational structures are fragile compared to larger cosmic scales. Neptune itself participates in delicate orbital resonances with other worlds. Its gravitational interaction with Pluto prevents collision despite the crossing geometry of their orbits. Every time Pluto approaches Neptune's orbital distance, the two bodies remain separated through an elegant timing relationship governed entirely by gravity, a resonance, a repeating mathematical dance unfolding silently across billions of kilometers. This reveals another uncomfortable truth. The solar system is not static architecture. It is dynamic equilibrium. Motion balancing motion. Gravity balancing gravity. An equilibrium can fail. Scientists now believe the early solar system may have once contained additional giant planets, later ejected entirely into interstellar space through gravitational chaos. Entire worlds may have been thrown into the darkness between stars. Rogue planets wandering eternally through freezing cosmic emptiness without sunlight at all. This changes the emotional meaning of Neptune's orbit. The planet is not simply out there, it is one survivor among many ancient gravitational instabilities. And beyond Neptune, the Sun's influence begins gradually weakening against the gravity of the galaxy itself. This transition is difficult to emotionally visualize because humans instinctively think the solar system as isolated. But the solar system is moving continuously through the Milky Way at extraordinary speed. The Sun orbits the galactic center roughly every 230 million years. 2, 3 by 10, 8 years. During a single galactic orbit, continents drift, species evolve, extinctions occur, and entire mountain ranges rise and erode away on Earth. Meanwhile, Neptune continues circling the Sun thousands upon thousands of times inside that larger galactic motion. Nested systems inside larger systems. Moons orbit planets. Planets orbit stars. Stars orbit galaxies. Galaxies move through expanding cosmic space itself. And every layer introduces new scales capable of overwhelming human intuition again. This is where Neptune begins losing even its planetary emotional identity. Viewed from Earth, it feels enormous and remote. Viewed against the galaxy, it becomes microscopic. The entire orbit of Neptune could disappear inside the Milky Way without noticeably altering the galaxy's structure at all. And the Milky Way itself contains perhaps hundreds of billions of stars. 1011. Many of those stars likely possess planetary systems of their own. Some may contain giant blue worlds larger than Neptune. Others may harbour frozen planets drifting through darkness much farther from their stars than Neptune ever travels from the Sun. This realization slowly destabilizes the emotional uniqueness humans attach to familiar celestial objects. Neptune feels singular because it belongs to our solar system. But cosmically, giant ice worlds may be common. The mechanisms shaping Neptune gravity, turbulence, internal heat, atmospheric chemistry likely repeat throughout the galaxy across unimaginable numbers of planetary systems. And beyond the galaxy, the scale expands again. The Milky Way itself belongs to the local group, a gravitational collection of galaxies moving together through space. The nearest major neighbouring galaxy, Andromeda, lies approximately 2.5 million light-years away. D25 by 10.6 light-years. The light entering human eyes from Andromeda tonight began travelling toward Earth before human civilization existed, before agriculture, before cities, before writing. Compared to such distances, Neptune suddenly feels close. This is the psychological mechanism astronomy repeatedly imposes. Every scale collapses inside a larger one, and human beings possess no evolved intuition capable of stabilizing against these expansions indefinitely. At some point, the nervous system simply stops emotionally converting numbers into meaning. Millions, billions, light-years, galaxies. The scales become abstract, yet reality itself remains physically true regardless of emotional comprehension. And Neptune exists inside that reality whether humans can emotionally process it or not. This creates an unusual existential tension. Human consciousness evolved to survive locally. Food, shelter, predators, social bonds. But intelligence accidentally opened access to cosmic scale. Now the human mind can perceive structures vastly exceeding the environments it evolved to emotionally navigate. Neptune becomes unsettling partly because it sits at the edge of intuitive containment, far enough to feel alien, close enough to remain physically real. A giant storm-wrapped planet orbiting in dim sunlight while the entire solar system drifts through a galaxy that itself moves through expanding cosmic darkness. And the farther outward one continues this chain of perspective, the more fragile human centrality becomes. Earth isn't central to the solar system. The solar system is not central to the galaxy. The galaxy is not central to the universe. There may be no center at all, only structures nested inside larger structures endlessly, gravity organizing matter temporarily against the backdrop of cosmic expansion. This may ultimately be why Neptune feels emotionally haunting rather than merely scientifically fascinating, because the planet stands at a threshold where human intuition begins losing its ability to emotionally dominate reality. Beyond Neptune, the solar system becomes sparse and cold. Beyond the solar system, stars separate across enormous gulfs of darkness. Beyond the galaxy, even galaxies themselves drift apart through expanding space-time. And still Neptune continues orbiting silently beneath its violent atmosphere, carrying ancient heat through freezing darkness as one small moving structure inside a universe so large that human language itself begins weakening under the weight of it. Silence behaves differently in deep space. On Earth, silence is never truly complete. Even in remote deserts or polar regions, the planet continues speaking softly through wind, shifting ice, distant oceans, microscopic life, atmospheric vibration. Human beings evolved inside a world saturated with sound and biological presence. But beyond Neptune, silence becomes structural. Not the absence of noise, the absence of environment itself. And Neptune sits dangerously close to that transition. This is one reason the planet feels emotionally isolated in ways Mars or Jupiter do not. The inner solar system still appears connected to the Sun emotionally. Light remains strong, heat remains present. Human exploration still feels conceptually possible. Neptune belongs to another psychological category. The Sun no longer dominates perception there. Darkness does. And beyond Neptune, the darkness expands into regions where sunlight weakens to irrelevance entirely. The nearest star beyond the Sun, Alpha Centauri, lies over 4 light-years away. D4 37 light-years? That number is emotionally deceptive because human intuition cannot naturally process light-years. A light-year is not merely distance. It is duration transformed into geography. It represents how far light travels through vacuum in an entire year. Even at the speed of light, the crossing requires years. Modern spacecraft would require tens of thousands of years to travel that distance. And suddenly the solar system itself begins feeling isolated. Not metaphorically isolated, physically isolated. The planets orbit together inside a relatively small gravitational island surrounded by enormous volumes of emptiness, separating stars from one another. Neptune exists near the outer edge of that island, a frontier world beside the approaching interstellar dark. This changes the emotional meaning of planetary exploration. People often imagine future human expansion romantically. Colonies spreading across the stars, civilizations crossing galaxies, technology overcoming distance. But the actual scales involved remain deeply hostile to biological life. Even travelling to Neptune with current technology requires patience measured in decades. Travelling beyond the solar system introduces distances so vast that human lifetimes become operational limitations. The Voyager spacecraft themselves illustrate this hauntingly. Voyager 2 passed Neptune in 1989 and continued outward. Today it moves through the outermost regions of the Sun's influence toward interstellar space. Yet even after nearly half a century of travel, Voyager remains astonishingly close to the solar system on galactic scales. The spacecraft carries a golden record. Human sounds, human music, human greetings. A fragile artifact of civilization drifting silently through darkness. And statistically, it will likely never encounter another civilization at all. This is where deep cosmic isolation becomes emotionally overwhelming. Because the universe is not merely large, it is sparsely populated across extraordinary distances. Stars appear dense in the night sky because perspective compresses them visually. But most stars are separated by trillions of kilometers of near total emptiness. The Milky Way itself may contain hundreds of billions of stars. Yet the average separation between neighboring stellar systems remains immense. Reality is mostly vacuum, mostly darkness, mostly silence, and Neptune represents one of the last major outposts before that silence begins emotionally swallowing the solar system itself. Even sunlight there feels lonely. Photons leaving the sun spread outward in every direction across expanding volumes of space. By the time they reach Neptune, they're astonishingly diluted. The warmth sustaining Earth becomes thin and fragile. This has profound psychological implications because humans unconsciously associate sunlight with safety and familiarity. But beyond Neptune, sunlight starts resembling memory more than presence, a fading connection to the inner worlds. And eventually, even Neptune disappears into the dark when viewed from sufficiently far away. This is another recurring pattern in astronomy. Every apparently enormous structure eventually vanishes into scale. From Earth, Neptune feels vast. From interstellar distance, it becomes invisible. The entire solar system itself would appear only as a faint point of light from neighboring stars. Human civilization, all cities, wars, art, suffering, history, languages, ambitions compressed into microscopic insignificance inside a pale stellar glow, almost impossible to distinguish from countless others. And still the silence continues outward. Astronomers now estimate that the observable universe contains perhaps 2 trillion galaxies. Into 1012, each galaxy may contain billions or hundreds of billions of stars. The numbers stop behaving emotionally. They become almost geological in abstraction, yet every one of those galaxies remains separated by enormous dark intervals through which no human being will ever naturally travel. The universe is not crowded the way the night sky emotionally suggests. It is overwhelmingly empty, and this emptiness creates a subtle existential pressure because human beings evolved socially. Survival depended on proximity to others. Isolation historically signaled danger. Separation from the tribe often meant death. Astronomy scales the isolation upward catastrophically. Earth is isolated from neighboring planets by immense vacuum. The solar system is isolated from neighboring stars by larger vacuum. Galaxies isolate themselves across even greater darkness. Reality organizes itself into islands separated by incomprehensible emptiness. Neptune helps reveal this because it exists near the emotional edge of human warmth. Beyond it, the solar system begins thinning into sparse debris fields and frozen objects drifting through weak sunlight. Eventually, even the sun's gravity loses dominance against the galaxy itself. And all the while, Neptune's storms continue in silence. This may be one of the strangest scientific truths humans ever discovered. Violence does not require sound. On Earth, storms roar, thunder cracks, hurricanes scream through cities. But Neptune's supersonic winds move through an atmosphere utterly inaudible to human ears across the vacuum of space. A storm larger than Earth can rage there in complete external silence. No witness hears it. No civilization records it emotionally. The violence exists physically without narrative. And perhaps this is why deep space feels psychologically haunting. Not because it contains monsters, but because it contains indifference on scales biological minds struggle to endure calmly. The universe does not oppose humanity. It simply does not prioritize humanity at all. Neptune's atmosphere churns because physics allows it. Stars burn because gravity compresses matter. Galaxies rotate because space-time permits structure. No intention guides these processes. No emotional meaning stabilizes them. And still human consciousness briefly emerged capable of recognizing this enormous silence surrounding it. A species born beside a warm ocean under a nearby sun somehow learned enough physics to understand that most of existence unfolds far beyond biological comfort, far beyond sound, far beyond warmth, far beyond the fragile local environment humans unconsciously mistake for reality itself. And Neptune waits there at the edge of that realization, turning endlessly beneath dark blue storms while the surrounding silence deepens outward toward the cold between stars. After a certain point, the science begins changing emotionally, not because the equations stop mattering, but because the implications slowly migrate inward. A planet like Neptune can initially feel abstract, a distant object for astronomers to study through telescopes and spectral analysis. Atmospheric chemistry, orbital mechanics, internal heat transport, magnetic asymmetry. But over time, something quieter emerges beneath the data, a confrontation with the actual character of reality itself, because Neptune is not frightening in the way humans usually define fear. It does not threaten civilization directly. Its storms will never reach Earth. Its freezing atmosphere cannot harm human life across billions of kilometers, and yet the planet still produces existential discomfort. Why? Because Neptune exposes how small the human emotional habitat truly is. Human beings evolved inside extraordinary protection without fully realizing it. Earth's atmosphere stabilizes temperature. Liquid water remains abundant. Oxygen circulates continuously through biological systems. The sun arrives each morning with reliable warmth. Gravity holds oceans in place while the magnetic field shields the surface from much of the surrounding cosmic radiation. People naturally mistake this stability for normality, but astronomy repeatedly reveals the opposite. Habitability appears fragile, localized, temporary. Neptune helps clarify this by existing just far enough from Earth to strip away many comforting assumptions while still remaining part of the same solar system. The planet demonstrates that reality does not gradually become slightly harsher beyond Earth. It becomes fundamentally different. The further outward humanity looks, the less the cosmos resembles an environment designed for life. Instead, life begins resembling a brief exception occurring inside overwhelmingly non-living structures, and this realization alters philosophical perspective in subtle ways. Human civilization spends enormous energy constructing permanence psychologically. Monuments, archives, religions, national identities. Historical narratives all partly attempt to stabilize human meaning against time. Yet Neptune quietly undermines that emotional project simply by existing. Because the planet belongs to timescales where human permanence becomes almost invisible, its storms evolve over decades, its seasons unfold over centuries, its formation reaches back billions of years. Even the language humans use begins failing emotionally at such scales. Words like ancient, distant, enormous, cold all evolved within terrestrial experience. They stretch under cosmic conditions until they become approximations rather than descriptions. Neptune is not merely cold, it exists near temperatures so low that ordinary chemistry transforms. It is not merely distant, it exists across separations where light itself requires hours simply to carry information. It is not merely old, its internal heat predates Earth's complex biosphere entirely. And still, despite this overwhelming scale, the planet remains only one object among countless others. This may be the deepest philosophical pressure astronomy exerts on human consciousness. The universe consistently refuses emotional proportionality. Human beings instinctively expect importance to correlate with attention. Things that feel emotionally central should occupy central positions physically, but reality behaves differently. Earth feels central emotionally because humans evolved there, yet Earth is cosmically minor. Human history feels vast emotionally because consciousness experiences time internally, yet recorded civilization occupies less than an instant compared to planetary history. Neptune intensifies this contradiction because it is both enormous and indifferent simultaneously. A world larger than Earth by volume many times over, generating storms of colossal violence, carrying ancient heat through freezing darkness, while remaining completely detached from biological meaning. This detachment can feel unsettling at first, but it also carries an unexpected form of calm, because once human beings stop expecting the universe to revolve around human importance, reality becomes strangely quieter. Not kinder, not safer, simply quieter. Neptune does not hate humanity. The outer darkness does not oppose civilization. The universe is not hostile in an emotional sense. It is indifferent. And indifference possesses a different psychological texture than malice. Malice implies attention. The cosmos rarely appears attentive at all. Stars explode without cruelty. Black holes consume matter without anger. Planets freeze without intention. Neptune's storms rage because physical laws allow them to rage. Nothing more. This realization can initially feel emotionally empty, but over longer reflection, it also strips away certain illusions that generate unnecessary human anxiety. Civilizations often behave as though their conflicts possess cosmic significance. Nations imagine permanence. Economies imagine continuity. Individuals imagine lasting control. Yet beneath Neptune's perspective, all such structures become temporary local arrangements inside a much larger unfolding universe. And strangely, this reduction can produce humility rather than despair. Because humility restores proportion, astronomy repeatedly demonstrates that human beings are not the center of reality. But it also demonstrates something equally profound. A tiny biological species on one small warm planet became capable of understanding this fact at all. Against extraordinary odds, matter organized itself into consciousness capable of looking outward toward Neptune and recognizing its own fragility. The universe produced observers. Temporary observers, certainly, but observers nonetheless. This creates a subtle philosophical tension inside astronomy that never fully resolves. On one hand, cosmic scale diminishes humanity physically. On the other hand, consciousness itself remains astonishing. Neptune does not know it exists. Its storms possess no awareness. Its winds contain no reflection. Its ancient heat carries no memory. But human beings can perceive Neptune, can model it, can imagine it, can emotionally respond to it. For a brief period in cosmic history, the universe became capable of observing one of its own distant frozen worlds through human minds. And perhaps that is enough. Not enough to conquer cosmic scale. Not enough to overcome mortality. Not enough to transform humanity into the center of existence. But enough to create meaning locally. Enough for wonder. Enough for reflection. Enough for a species standing beside warm oceans under sunlight to recognize how extraordinary it is that anything can understand reality at all. Neptune therefore becomes more than a distant violent planet. It becomes a mirror reflecting the limits of human intuition and the strange beauty of consciousness itself. A blue world orbiting through darkness billions of kilometers away, teaching humanity that reality is vastly colder, larger, older, and more indifferent than civilization once imagined, and yet also revealing that even within such immensity, awareness briefly appeared, small, fragile, temporary, but capable of looking outward into the cosmic night and understanding, however incompletely, what it was seeing. The final unsettling implication of Neptune is not hidden in its storms, it is hidden in what those storms suggest about the future of reality itself. Because Neptune is often imagined as a distant world at the edge of the solar system, but in another sense, it may also be a preview, a glimpse into the long cold direction toward which the cosmos itself is slowly moving. Human beings evolved during an unusually bright era of cosmic history. Stars still burn abundantly across galaxies. Heavy elements remain common. Planetary systems continue forming. The universe, though ancient by human standards, is still comparatively young on cosmological timescales. But this condition is temporary. The universe changes, always, and almost every large-scale process astronomers observe points toward a future dominated increasingly by darkness, isolation, and cold expansion. Neptune quietly resembles that future more than Earth does. On Earth, energy still feels immediate. Sunlight floods the atmosphere daily. Biological systems recycle warmth continuously. Human beings experience existence as active, crowded, and thermally alive. Neptune exists closer to the opposite condition. There, Sunlight already arrives, weak and diluted. Heat must emerge from ancient internal reserves buried deep beneath the atmosphere. Darkness dominates visual experience. Isolation stretches in every direction. And yet the planet still remains active. This matters profoundly, because it suggests that even as stars fade and warmth declines, physical processes may continue long after biology disappears. The universe does not require life in order to continue evolving. Neptune demonstrates this beautifully and horrifyingly at the same time. Its storms operate without ecosystems. Its winds move without oceans filled with organisms. Its ancient heat circulates without consciousness. Matter simply continues obeying physical law. And eventually, humanity itself may become another temporary phenomenon erased into cosmic history while planets, stars, and gravitational systems continue transforming long afterward. This is where astronomy becomes existential in the deepest possible sense, because the future of the solar system is not stable. The sun itself is aging. At this moment, deep within the sun's core, hydrogen atoms continue fusing into helium through nuclear reactions, generating the energy that illuminates every planet. 41H4 He plus energy. But hydrogen fuel is finite, slowly, almost imperceptibly on human timescales. The sun grows brighter over millions and billions of years. Its internal structure evolves. Core composition changes. Energy output increases gradually. One day, far in the future, the sun will begin exhausting the hydrogen in its core, and when that process advances far enough, the solar system will transform catastrophically. The sun will expand into a red giant. Mercury may vanish entirely. Venus will almost certainly be destroyed. Earth itself may become uninhabitable long before direct engulfment occurs. Oceans could evaporate. Atmospheric chemistry could collapse. Surface temperatures may sterilize the planet completely. Human civilization, if it survives that long at all, would face the destruction of the environment that created it. Meanwhile, Neptune will continue orbiting outward in the darkness, and something emotionally strange may happen there. As the sun expands, the outer planets will temporarily receive greater warmth than they do today. The frozen boundaries of the solar system could soften beneath the dying sun's enlarged luminosity. Neptune's atmosphere may change dramatically. Its chemistry may shift. Its distant twilight could brighten for a brief cosmic moment. This reversal feels almost mythological. Earth dying from excess solar heat while Neptune receives temporary illumination from the same aging star. But the warmth will not last. Eventually the sun will shed its outer layers into space, leaving behind a dense stellar remnant, a white dwarf. A dead star, still hot initially, but no longer generating new fusion energy. The remaining solar system would drift around this stellar corpse in deepening cold. And Neptune, or whatever remains of Neptune after billions more years of orbital evolution, may continue circling silently through that darkness. This future carries extraordinary emotional weight because it reveals how temporary even stars truly are. Human beings instinctively treat the sun as eternal because biological life depends on its continuity. Civilizations rise assuming sunrise will continue indefinitely, but stars are processes, not permanent objects. They ignite, they evolve, they fade, and the universe itself appears headed toward increasing separation and cooling on the largest scales imaginable. Galaxies are moving apart due to cosmic expansion, V equals sign H0, DE, over immense spans of time. Distant galaxies will disappear beyond observable reach entirely as space-time itself expands. Future civilizations, if any survive for trillions of years, may see a radically emptier cosmos than humans observe today. The night sky itself will slowly darken. Stars will eventually exhaust their fuel. New star formation will decline. Galactic collisions will reorganize structures. Black holes may become among the last major energetic objects remaining in the distant future universe. And eventually, even those may evaporate through Hawking radiation across incomprehensible durations. Reality itself appears to trend toward lower usable energy, toward greater entropy, toward cold dispersion across expanding darkness. This is sometimes called the heat death of the universe. Not an explosion, not a final battle, not a dramatic apocalypse, simply gradual fading, motion slowing, stars disappearing, distances increasing, darkness deepening. And Neptune feels emotionally connected to that future because it already exists near the frontier where warmth begins losing dominance. The planet demonstrates that cosmic coldness is not empty. It is active, violent at times, but ultimately indifferent to biology. Human beings evolved during a temporary interval when the universe still possessed abundant free energy. Stable stars and habitable worlds. That era may not last forever. Neptune quietly reminds us of this every moment it circles beneath weak sunlight billions of kilometers from Earth. A giant blue world surviving in the cold outskirts of a star system destined itself to disappear eventually. And perhaps the final unsettling realization is this. The universe does not appear structured toward permanence at any scale. Storms dissolve, species vanish, stars die, galaxies drift apart. Even matter itself may not remain stable eternally. Everything moves, everything changes, everything transitions gradually into larger states of entropy and silence. And still, during one brief interval inside that immense unfolding process, human beings emerged capable of understanding enough cosmology to recognize where the future leads, toward colder distances, toward darker skies, toward a universe that, over unimaginable time, may slowly begin resembling Neptune more than Earth. By the time the mind reaches Neptune fully, something inside it has already become quieter. The urgency of Earth begins fading slightly. Human conflicts still exist. Cities still glow at night. Civilizations still argue about borders, wealth, identity, and permanence. But against the immense cold distances of the outer solar system, those structures start feeling delicate. Temporary arrangements suspended briefly beneath a warm star. And far beyond them, Neptune continues orbiting silently. The planet does not hurry. Its year unfolds across generations. Its storms evolve through decades. Its sunlight arrives weakened after crossing billions of kilometers of darkness. Everything there feels slowed by scale itself. Even light seems tired by the time it reaches Neptune. This is perhaps why the planet lingers psychologically after contemplation. Not because it is the most violent object in the cosmos. There are stars far more destructive, black holes far more extreme, galaxies colliding with energies beyond comprehension, but Neptune remains emotionally haunting because it still belongs to the same solar system as Earth. It is close enough to feel real, a genuine neighbouring world, and yet distant enough to reveal how narrow the human environment truly is. The farther outward the documentary journey has travelled, the more Earth has transformed from the centre of reality into a small thermal refuge, surrounded by overwhelming coldness. This is not a pessimistic observation, only a proportional one. Human beings evolved inside extraordinary rarity without naturally recognizing it. Breathable atmospheres are rare. Stable liquid water appears rare. Long-term planetary stability may be rare. Conscious observers capable of a reflection may be rarer still. And all of it exists within a universe mostly composed of vacuum, radiation, gravity, darkness, and silence. Neptune quietly embodies that larger balance. Its atmosphere moves with terrifying violence despite receiving almost no warmth from the sun. Internal heat rises from ancient planetary formation processes older than every living organism on Earth. Supersonic winds cross methane clouds beneath dim blue twilight while no living thing witnesses them directly. The storms simply continue, and eventually, even those storms will likely disappear. Nothing physical remains unchanged forever. Not planets, not stars, not galaxies. Astronomy teaches impermanence at every scale. Yet, strangely, there is peace hidden inside that realization too. Because once permanence stops being expected, existence itself begins feeling different. More immediate, more fragile, more extraordinary precisely because it is temporary. Neptune's storms matter scientifically not because they last forever, but because they exist at all inside such improbable conditions. Human consciousness matters similarly. A temporary arrangement of biology capable of looking outward into cosmic darkness and understanding, however incompletely, what it sees. That understanding changes people. After prolonged exposure to cosmic perspective, ordinary life often feels simultaneously smaller and more precious. Small because civilization occupies such a thin layer against planetary and cosmic timescales. Precious because consciousness itself may be extraordinarily uncommon. Neptune contains no cities, no voices, no memory, no history in the human sense. Only physics, only atmosphere, pressure, motion, gravity, ancient heat escaping slowly into darkness. And still the planet possesses beauty. Deep blue cloud bands illuminated faintly by distant sunlight. White methane storms drifting through enormous atmospheric systems. A hidden interior where chemistry and pressure create conditions almost impossible for humans to visualize emotionally. The beauty exists independently of observers. This may be one of the quietest revelations astronomy offers. The universe contains magnificence that does not require recognition. Nebulae form whether anyone sees them. Stars ignite whether anyone names them. Planets evolve whether consciousness exists nearby or not. Human beings did not create cosmic beauty. They merely became capable of noticing it. And perhaps that is enough. Not enough to conquer mortality, not enough to escape cosmic scale, but enough to participate briefly in awareness. Neptune will continue orbiting long after everyone alive today disappears. New generations may study it with more advanced telescopes. Future spacecraft may descend into its atmosphere. Scientists not yet born may eventually understand mechanisms that remain mysterious now. Or perhaps human civilization itself will vanish before such journeys occur. The universe does not promise continuation, only possibility. And still the blue planet remains there tonight beyond Saturn, beyond Uranus, beneath fading sunlight. Cold, violent, silent. Immense beyond ordinary emotional intuition, a world where the sun already feels weak, where storms larger than Earth form without purpose, where ancient heat still rises from the birth of the solar system itself. The mind returns from such places changed slightly, not destroyed, not hopeless, only quieter, more aware of scale, more aware of fragility, more aware that reality extends far beyond the small warm environment that shaped human instinct. And beyond Neptune, the darkness still continues outward. Tonight, Neptune is still there, a blue world suspended in the outer darkness, turning slowly beneath storms no human being will ever stand beneath. Sunlight is reaching it now after a journey of more than 4 hours across empty space. By the time that faint light touches the upper atmosphere, entire human conversations have already ended on Earth. Cities have darkened into sleep. People have been born, others have died, and Neptune continues orbiting silently through the cold edge of the solar system. The planet does not know humanity exists. Its winds move without awareness. Its storms form without intention. Its ancient internal heat continues rising through layers of methane and hydrogen exactly as physics demands. Nothing there pauses for civilization, and perhaps that is the final emotional weight Neptune leaves behind. Not fear, perspective. Because from Earth, human life feels immense. Problems feel permanent. History feels central. Civilizations imagine themselves standing at the center of meaningful reality. But beyond the warmth of the inner planets, the universe becomes increasingly vast, increasingly silent, increasingly indifferent to human scale. Neptune waits inside that silence, a reminder that reality is larger than instinct allows, older than memory allows, colder than comfort allows, and still astonishingly active despite all of it. The storms there continue in darkness without witnesses. The atmosphere shifts across centuries. The distant sun glows faintly above frozen clouds, while the planet circles through an ocean of blackness so large the human mind can barely hold it emotionally for long. Yet somehow, For one brief moment in cosmic history, a species emerged on a small warm planet capable of understanding this, capable of building instruments delicate enough to see Neptune, capable of sending a spacecraft across billions of kilometers of emptiness, capable of realizing that the universe was never designed around human life at all. That realization can feel lonely, but it can also feel strangely peaceful, because once the illusion of centrality fades, something quieter replaces it. Wonder, not the loud excitement of discovery, a slower kind. The realization that existence itself is far more immense than human beings naturally imagine while living inside the warmth of Earth. And far beyond the inner sunlight, Neptune continues moving through the dark. Cold blue storms circling endlessly beneath a dim and distant star.